This is Daniel King demonstrating my game prototype Field of Cures version 0.2. So Field of Cures is a mobile-first designed game about crossbreeding plants in order to test plant compounds as medicines to cure diseases. So the basic gameplay is that every plant in the world has two color genes. It's a combination of two colors, and when you're trying to cure a disease, you know one half of the answer, and then you have to guess the other half. You have to use a process of elimination, trial and error, to discover cures. In the beginning, there are only two possible options, and as the game goes on, it becomes much more complex of a puzzle. So I'm going to go ahead and try a hypothesis that the pure orange plant will be the cure for this disease. So what I have to do here is I can select the flower. This brings up a pop-up gene reader, which shows that this has type genes that match. It has two orange genes, and it shows the flower's toxicity here. This is a button to gather pollen from the flower. Now I can see the genes of the pollen I've gathered. And then the other button is to harvest, pollinate and harvest. So this is pretty straightforward. I mixed a flower with its own pollen. I got this compound, which I add to the flask. I can replant one of the seeds. Planting a seed costs 5 of the in-game currency I'm calling flasks. And then I can sell the rest of the seeds to recoup some of that expense. Now, in order to make money faster, there is a certain combination that's randomized from phase to phase that has a higher retail value. So I can shift gears. I'll collect pollen from this one, pollinate and harvest this one, and so then these bonus combination specimens will sell for a higher price. Faster way to make money that I can use to then plant seeds. So the short-term goal is just to make sure you have enough cash to fulfill the medium-term goal of gathering enough of the plant compound, of the target plant compound, to test it. So I'll go ahead and continue with that. I only need 3 doses for a pilot study. And here we are. So got a positive pilot study result. Now, the serious part of this game is that you have decision points where you can do a longer, more proper randomized controlled trial, or you can do what I'm calling a spin study, which is basically doing a clinical trial where the methods and the results are manipulated to make it look better than it is, to get a drug to market faster. The way this plays out in the game is that I can do a spin study, which is essentially a shortcut, but there's a chance that I'll get a positive result, but it won't actually be the cure, which of course means that you're selling a fake cure to people who are sick with terrible moral consequences there. So I'm going to go ahead and go with a randomized controlled trial for now. My hypothesis remains the same because I had a positive pilot study result. Let's see, I have one pure orange flower here. It's kind of on the small side, and it's also a high toxicity specimen. In the first level, the toxicity is not very much of a problem, but as the game goes on, there's a maximum toxicity that you can't exceed, and that becomes a much more and more limiting factor. So I'm going to go ahead and cross this with something that's bigger and less toxic. Let's see, I'll take pollen from this one. I'll mix it with this one. And then the little number that pops up here is the toxicity. Unfortunately, I did not get the result I was looking for, but I still have that same pollen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try again. Let's see. Here we go. So the reason that worked is that the one I had pollinated had a recessive gene for that other type of flower. And by luck of the draw, The more recessive gene came from both parents and produced this. So now I'll go through the process of harvesting up to 9 doses, replanting, selling. So if this seems pretty clicky at this point, pretty tedious, I agree with you. And much of the value of having finished this design is that I now know what I want to change for version 0.3. But first I want to go through the rest of the features I built. Okay. That went pretty quick. Okay, so it turned out that even though the pilot study result was positive, when I did the bigger clinical trial, it was a negative result. So now I have to have a new hypothesis. There's only one option left, luckily. So now I have to go through the process for this. Alright. So I'll go ahead and cheat my way forward a little bit so I can get into the other features. I have a nice cheat code here, which fills up the flask faster. Okay, so I have discovered the cure for a disease. What happens now is that I get to unlock a new field in the game world, and then I will go into the trial process for the next disease. So I'll pick out this field, and then now I know half the answer, but there are 3 potential other halves of the answer. So I'll start with this one. So now I have 2 fields in the game world. Every time you unlock a field, you get a biome that has different native species in it. I can click back and forth, back to the world view, back to my first field. And what happens between each trial is that these fields get reset. So even though I could just take a pure red flower from over here, to sell that one. Let's say I just want to store these seeds for later. I go over here where red flowers are not a native species. I can plant them here, but they will not persist after I run a trial. The fields get reset so that every part of the world has its native species. And this becomes really important because much further on in the game, you have the option to develop parts of the world, factories and other infrastructure, but that means that the plants won't grow there anymore. So you have to strike a balance between development and preserving the natural biodiversity of the world. That's another one of the serious aspects of the game. Let's see. To go a little bit more into how the gene reader works, we can see that the pollen I've selected, it came from a flower that looks like this, the most basic type. But this flower has a recessive type gene that's not expressed. The dominant gene is expressed, but the recessive is not. But that means that if I mix this with another flower that also has a recessive gene, there's a possibility, I can get one offspring that looks like this and another offspring that looks like this. And this is simple, Punnett square genetics is the core puzzle mechanic of the game. I also have, you can buy seeds, just a random kind of loot box of seeds essentially. You can use the in-game currency. It'll give you just a random grab bag of potentially every kind of seed there might be in the game. Oh, that's a very rare one. And then there's also the shell of a freemium mechanic here. Right now it's free, I can just press it. But the idea is that this would be a mobile game with some freemium mechanics built into it, but in an ethical way. That's going to be the main focus of my dissertation. Once I have the game design in a place that I like it, it's really going to be focusing on what is the best way to implement freemium mechanics so that they work without being annoying or predatory. Alright, so we've seen now the features that I've built. How to make the game fun. What are my ideas? So the first one is, the way I have the toxicity system set up is, it's tedious. There's a toxicity score. The types of flowers are tied to a lower toxicity number. Those are pretty arbitrary. And then just as the game goes on, you have to constantly watch how much toxicity you're building up in order not to ruin your batch. That's too complicated. It's too much numbers. So my idea is that as the game goes on, instead you're just going to have a certain type of flower that it has to be. They're going to say that in order for you to run a trial with this compound, it has to be this type of flower, not this one. The idea is that the flowers with more petals are less toxic, so instead of there being this kind of exponential relationship at work here, I'm just going to say more petals is better. And as the game goes on, you need to use those ones which are naturally less common in the world. The gene reader is also pretty tedious. In order for me to find a plant with a recessive gene in it, I have to look into each one to see it. And other than that, the reason that I have the colors in the gene reader is that I worry about people with different types of color blindness. I wanted the game to still be accessible. But I've thought of a better solution for all of this. This is essentially a very manual gene reader. You have to literally click on everything to see what its genes are. I would give people a smart gene scanner. Basically, the game knows what type of flower you need, it knows what color combination you need, it knows what combination is going to give you extra money. So I would just have the game automatically highlight, here are the ones that you need to do your science, here are the ones you can sell for extra cash. There would be an indicator overlay that would automatically point these things out. And that way it eliminates the need to click into everything and see exactly what its genome looks like. So yeah, getting away from manually searching everything's genes to just having a smart gene scanner that does that tedious work for you, so you can focus on solving the puzzle of how do I get the exact right combination of genes that I need. So in terms of the narrative, in terms of the clinical trials process, everything is done with pop-ups right now, which is the easiest way to do it, and also the worst. It's really just a factor of me still being a novice at programming. Oh, see, that batch became too toxic. Start over again. Yeah, it's really hard to keep track of that. I'll just cheat my way forward. Alright. So yeah, these pop-ups explaining what happened, where are you in the clinical trials process, what is the implication of choosing one or the other. It's all very abstract and texty. My idea is to actually have a diagram, like a flow chart, showing up at the top. Here's what a pilot study is. Here are the branching paths that you could go down. You know, here's how far you are to getting this medicine to market. I think a representation like that would be a lot easier to use. When it comes to the actual, should you do the long but good science, or should you take the shortcut? I already have planned to have some NPCs in the game that will tug you in different directions. I have a science advisor and a business advisor who both want to help you, but have very different opinions about how to conduct science, whether you should take the shortcuts and get things to market faster, or whether you should do the science very carefully. That character development will just put a lot more personality into the game. In terms of the world map, I realized that it would give the game a stronger sense of narrative if you were actually discovering each section in a linear sequence. Almost like the old school Super Mario World, Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3. Rather than just having people with this clunky illusion of choice where they click on something and then they have a new zone, but that's not really related to any of the other zones in any logical way. So a progression through the game world rather than just clicking at random and getting a new field. And then the biggest thing that's missing from this, especially since it's a mobile casual game, is the juiciness factor. It's just the idea of every time you do something, you want to have good sound design and you want to have fun animations as a constant reward, constant feedback for doing things right. So for example, selling a whole bunch of things, all it does right now is it just adds a number to this number. What it should do is it should show you exactly how much money you've earned with an animated graphic so that you feel that sense of, the short-term success of earning a bunch of cash that you can use for something else. For the sound design, what I want to do, and this is an experimental idea, I want to have every color combination in the game linked to a different chord, to a different combination of notes, so that whenever you click something, it actually has a unique audio signature that you could kind of unconsciously learn over time. In a weird kind of way, every single flower would sound different. It would have the same sound each time between the same species. So it would be just this consistent soundscape, but also very procedurally generated, just like the different species are. And then the flowers, the plants can be a lot more interesting. These are placeholder graphics that I actually drew by hand. I can do a lot more with this, just still using the same basic concept that, there are 2 layers here. They get colored depending on the 2 color genes. More petals is better, but I can have a lot more variety than just, everything looking like a dandelion with different colors effectively. And then, of course, the interface can look nicer. So I have a long list for version 0.3. And then behind the scenes, in the process of making this over 4 months, I was also in a programming class. And I learned how to actually use a for loop, for example. So 3 months ago, I was building part of the game and I had wrote something that took like 70 lines of code, whereas 2 weeks ago, I wrote something equally complex and I knew how to do it in 12 lines because I actually knew how to implement a for loop correctly. And it's cool to see that my skill has actually improved that much. And then, I go back and look at my old code and think like, well, I need to rewrite all of this. So the conclusion is this is 0.2, obviously not a finished game. I will go through the exercise of writing an extended abstract about this and preparing a demo video as if I was going to submit it to a conference. This isn't conference ready. Version 0.3 I hope will be conference ready when the time comes. I've got big ideas for how to fix everything, how to change everything, how to make the game better. But I am proud of what I have achieved this fall. Alright, well, until next time.